Hi guys, Casey Talks EV here, and as you can tell from the thumbnail, I've actually been given a MG5 EV for review basically. So I just want to thank Maple Garage for lending me the vehicle for, well, at least the Saturday and the Sunday. They've been pretty good to me with my ZS EV in particular, especially when it came to software updates. I'll no doubt unless I can't do otherwise, I'll definitely be taking my ZS EV to them for things like regular servicing. They actually have some really excellent deals as well on the ZS EV and MG5 in particular. I think they're doing a scrappage scheme at the moment. I'm not quite sure whether that's nationwide or dealer specific, but they're also offering some 0% finance deals, so please go and check them out. I'll leave a link in the description. So today, a lot of these comparisons are going to be, I've got quite a lot of notes here, and I've got quite a lot to talk about today actually. A lot of these sort of comparisons are going to be between the ZS EV and the 5. I know that obviously they are different body styles. You're talking about a compact SUV for the ZS EV, and this one is an estate car. But the likelihood is that you are going to see it at your MG dealer at the same time, and they are going to be both with you to test drive and to see. This video is definitely primarily for people who either own a ZS EV already or have at least test driven it and are going to test drive the MG5. There are going to be a few things that are going to be touched up on in later in the video. Basically, it's going to be an all-round sort of video. Hopefully it'll be useful to some people, and then I will give my sort of personal opinion on a few things. So anyway, let's get started. So in terms of the interior, I am going to make quite a lot of comparisons to the ZS EV in particular, but hopefully when you sort of get to the dealership, you'll be able to actually have a good sort of look and feel inside. Overall, it has been a bit of a mixed bag in terms of in comparison to the ZS EV. So some areas have actually improved quite considerably. So for example, the bit above the glove box is now a soft touch leather, faux leather probably, or vinyl. Whereas on the ZS EV it's hard plastic. Likewise, the top of where the central lock-in buttons are is now soft touch again. However, the top part of it is still hard plastic, and just like the ZS EV, and the armrest as well, that is just like the ZS EV, so it's a bit softer. One area that it has been made worse, which I'm quite surprised of, to be quite honest with you. A lot of car reviewers do bang on and start bashing that dashboard top for some ungodly reason, and I haven't figured out why. But that is now hard plastic. In the ZS EV, the part where you could definitely touch was actually a bit softer, whereas towards the front of the windscreen, that's when it started to become a bit more hard plastic. Overall, I think that the little bits that have improved kind of outweigh the top of the dashboard. But anyway, in terms of refinement and wind noise, it's pretty well restrained, just like the ZS EV. One observation that I would say, and I've had a friend in the car with me that has been both in the ZS EV and the 5, is that in terms of wind whistle from the front, and I've noticed this, it's definitely reduced, I think, compared to the ZS EV. That's probably just primarily due to the body shape, I think. Overall wind noise from this area is absolutely fine. Maybe it's probably because that has been reduced that I can hear a lot more from the rear. So anything sort of from the front rear passengers onwards, it's definitely a lot more noticeable. I don't know whether that's just because the wind noise in the ZS have primarily come from the front, and that's why I haven't noticed the rear, or whatever. A very, very nice touch, I think, is the digital display, which I'll show here. I really like the fact now it displays battery percentage. And you still get the analog dials, which in my opinion, for just a glance, are better than some digital displays. You get the best of both worlds either way, I think. I normally leave mine both on I normally have obviously the speedo because that's analog, but you leave it on the digital speedometer. The biggest, most important thing I think I could talk about the interior is that now we have an auto dimming mirror. This was, I thought, one of the features where I didn't understand the real kind of point in having one until finally I have, and I've driven it at night both, well, now tonight, today, and yesterday, and oh my, it makes a huge difference. I think I'm going to be really annoyed about the fact that my car doesn't have that component. My ZS EV doesn't have that little bit, and I think that's going to be a bit unfortunate. maybe there's an aftermarket fix for that. If you know anything, just leave a comment below, because that I think I'm gonna miss that when I get back into my ZS EV. Another thing is that this is I guess a sort of a minor benefit, but you do notice it. The ZS EV's heated seats, I think, work very odd. In the 5, you still don't get a sort of stepped or intensity level of heated seats. That's not necessarily too much of a problem if you haven't already got used to having that. But the one thing that my ZS loved doing for some reason is basically it used to ramp up to a really high intensity. Effectively, it felt like it was always burning you, really. And then it will drop back down to a gentle heat. Whereas this one, I think, has been programmed now to rise up to a gentle heat and then plateau, which I think is a much better way of really doing things. Although that being said, some people might want that quick burst of heat before it gets to a gentle sort of heat, but I guess that's personal preference, really, and I think that's a benefit for me, at least. Another thing is when I tried to fold the seats down and then put it back up, the seat belt didn't immediately snag on the back of the sort of in the rear, so that means you have to pull it back and then get the seat belt around. That's quite nice. The one thing that I would say, though, is that even my Hyundai i20, it had these little slots where you basically put your seatbelt in, and when you put your seats down and put it back up, it never snagged at that point. To be quite honest with you, that's not that difficult to do, and I think a lot more cars should have it. Maybe that was just a Hyundai thing, I don't know. Final thing, really, there are 3 headrests in the back now, so compared to only 2 for the ZS EV. Now, the only reason why I'd find this, well, first of all, it obviously does somewhat increase safety, but as far as I'm aware, in terms of taxi drivers in particular, I think certain councils need you to have 3 headrests in the back before it's allowed to be operated as a taxi. But if that's the case, then obviously there's 3 headrests in the back. This may be more applicable for a taxi. So that's basically most of the interior. The only other thing I can really say, though, is that the boot is absolutely fine. I mean, I've done a quick trip down to Sheffield and Costco, and that's not been too much of a problem. So I'm sure that my ZS EV would have been able to take it as well. So at least boot space-wise, it isn't particularly that much in it. I think actually this is ever so slightly less. I think it's 464 litres boot space compared to 470 in the ZS EV. Whether that makes any bit of difference, I've not really noticed. So in terms of range, it's certainly really nice to get into a car at 96% and see 180 miles on the range estimation. So this car, when you turn it on, I think it defaults to normal and 2 on the Curve setting, with, I think, heating on. I think maybe that's just because the heating was on before or something. But that was really nice to see with all of those on and seeing 180 miles. In my sort of testing, I think that's about right anyway, you know, give or take. Obviously, this is a brand new car. Within the first 1,000 miles or so, normally, what I've noticed from my ZS EV is that it got a lot better at figuring out how much range it honestly had, and you got a lot better at figuring out how much range it had. It's got a 52.5 kilowatt-hour gross pack, and according to the brochure, 48.8 kilowatt-hours usable. I've actually done a range test on this, which is going to be published after this video. I felt as though that the initial impression was more important than the range test video. But for some reason, and I think this is due to the calibration of the battery pack, it's a brand new car, etc. My testing actually showed it was around 52.2 kilowatt hours usable, which I have a feeling after 1,000 miles, you would figure out roughly how much that is. If you go by the brochure figures, it's only a 13% increase in net battery capacity. But again, aerodynamics plays a huge part, especially at motorway speeds, which is the test that I did. So according to my testing, I got around an additional 22%, I think was the exact figure. And around 160 miles, 100% down to 0 state of charge, which is absolutely brilliant, I think. Okay, it's nowhere near the WLTP figure of 214, but that being said, the MG ZS EV's one wasn't anywhere near the WLTP figure for motorway. And I think once you get into mixed driving, I think most certainly 240 miles is probably in the bag, really. And then even in town driving, I reckon significantly more. So my ZS EV in the summer, for example, I never got around to doing 200 miles in it. I think, especially in Hull's traffic right now, I think that would be the. I think that would actually kill me. It would indicate around 200 miles range. I reckon that this car would probably indicate what 250 in the town if you're going to do that, especially in the summer. So hopefully I'll put some more information on in the next video. But pretty much range is definitely a noticeable increase over the ZS EV. You're looking at around 160 miles in, well, 10 degrees, 10 degrees. A little bit more wind than what I'd normally test as well. But unfortunately, I've only had the car I will only be able to have the car for the day. But it did really admirably, to be honest. And I've not really had any major issues. So that's range sort of covered. So, first of all, I'm going to say that the MG5 EV is certainly not a bad car in any way, shape, or form. In fact, actually, it's a really good car. It's comfortable, it's refined, it handles better than my ZS EV. Digital dials are lovely. I think cabin quality has improved overall. And in fact, it's a great car, and for 26,995 list price, it's really good. Very great value for money. However, and here's the kicker, I think that in a lot of areas, it feels as though the MG UK has kind of decided to do as little work as possible to get this car onto the UK market. You can see it kind of physically. So from the front, it doesn't have the MG family grille that you find on the 3, the ZS EV, or the HS. It's definitely not hideous. And overall, the profile of the car is absolutely fine. But I feel as though they already had a brand identity in their grille design, and they should have maintained and put the effort in maintaining that. Couple other things and other omissions which I find quite confusing, really, and this goes back to, I feel as though that they've done as little work as possible, is first of all, this car doesn't have a panoramic roof on the top spec exclusive model. So this is an exclusive model. It's got leather interior, whatever. Panoramic roof, especially in this sort of car, would make it a lot airier in the rear to sit in. It feels a lot airier. I think that is a big omission, which is very confusing. Also, MG Pilot's missing completely, and you don't even get adaptive cruise control. You only get standard cruise control. And more pressingly, you don't even get safety kit, such as AEB. You don't, or speed sign recognition, I think that's part of the safety package. Which means, as far as I'm aware, it will lose a couple stars in the Euro NCAP safety test. Now, the issue isn't necessarily it's going to be an unsafe car, but as a spacious family car, which it is, looking at the safety rating is an important metric that a lot of families, when choosing their family cars, look at. And if it doesn't have that 5-star safety rating, they're probably going to be turned away from it. And just to lose out on that, primarily possibly due to cost, it's very competitive in terms of price, especially on the base model. It kind of seems a little bit confusing. I would have been more willing to forego certain things in exchange for things like AEB, or paid an ever so slightly higher price for things like AEB. But I guess only time will tell in terms of the sales. There are a couple more software foibles as well that I've noticed. For example, the automatic handbrake setting doesn't save. And when you turn off the car, that can be sorted out in software, not a problem. Again, you're going to notice on the range test, I'm going to quote it in bar, which I'm going to convert back to PSI anyway. You can't change that back to PSI. So I guess those two things can be definitely sorted out in software. What I am going to say, though, and I'm not trying to nitpick this car, but when you do have another car in the range, the ZS EV, which is a year older and has all of this kit onto it, which was almost a selling point at the time, really. I mean, that panoramic roof was absolutely lovely when I first got in. I was originally going to buy the Excite until I saw that, and I just saw the leather interior. I then went, you know what, it's worth the extra money, and you know what, it definitely is. So if you do see a car, the ZS EV, in the showroom or in the dealership, which is a year older car, which has all of these features, and you don't need the range that the 5 gives you, okay, it gives you an extra 25% range or whatever, it may actually be somehow worth spending more money on the ZS EV and getting a better equipped car. I don't actually understand why they haven't been able to fit this, because as far as I'm aware, the ZS Petrol didn't have a panoramic roof, for example. So clear enough, they had to put some time and effort into putting that panoramic roof onto that car. And I wouldn't mind spending a little bit more money and having better price differentiation across your trim levels. So if there are people who don't need these sort of gadgets or don't need these niceties, they can pay the lower price. So the base model could have stayed pretty much the same. And they could have had the same sort of trim levels that they used to have on the ZS Petrol, which was Explore, Excite, Exclusive, where the Exclusive would have been the top spec. Prices around 29,000 list or 30,000 list, maybe even a bit more. It probably would still be fairly good value in the grand scheme of things, especially given what's on the market at the moment. I think the one thing that I would say is that obviously the MG ZS EV's range is already perfectly fine for my needs. And as I say, I don't need the 25% additional range. The kit, especially MG Pilot, makes the car a lot more enjoyable to drive and a much more pleasant experience, especially on long journeys. If they had one look at what the ZS EV had, then clear enough, they would have realised that they could have had a bit more consistency. I think if it had all of that equipment, if it had the MG face, the MG family grille, I would be turning around and saying here right now, this car, if you're looking for a practical family car and you're not too pestered about whether or not it's an SUV or not, even though it, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference. It's not as though it has four-wheel drive. It might have a bit higher ground clearance, so better on speed humps and things. And I guess for people with limited mobility, then that definitely is there. But for me personally, at least, the only reason why I bought the ZS EV was that it was an excellent car. In terms of PCP, I'm sure that the 5 is definitely cheaper. You're looking at, I think, 249 and 269 for the the Excite and Exclusive respectively. I think similar deposits as well, whereas on the ZS EV you're looking at 269 for the Excite and 299 for the Exclusive. But bear in mind, as again, you have a lot more kit. The other argument is obviously, okay, they may target different customers, but when you have a look at the marketing brochures and you look at all of that, they're basically trying to tell you it's a family car. So really, it doesn't target different completely different markets. Okay, one of them's a compact SUV and the other one's a estate car, but at the end of it, families are going to buy these cars. And families, what do they care about? Safety. They probably also care about actually making their lives as easy as possible. Things like MG Pilot do take a lot of the effort. You still have to obviously pay attention, and I'm definitely going to make that clear. It does take a lot of the hassle out of long distance motorway driving, especially after the comfort update where it doesn't bong at you every 5 seconds. So what I want to do is give you a scenario, and I'm going to answer what I would give for that scenario. And the fact is that you walk into an MG dealer because you've seen, I don't know, the ZS EV, and you've seen all the 5 EV online. But what you're going to do is, especially if you go to a absolutely amazing garage like Maple Garage, brilliant people, they're probably going to let you test drive both the ZS EV and the 5. Let's say that you test drive the ZS EV first, then the 5, or even vice versa, to be quite honest with you. I think what you're going to notice is all of this kit missing, and you're going to look at the front and you're going to see it, and you're going to go, it doesn't really look like all your other cars, does it? You're going to start asking those questions, and it is going to make you question that purchase. Whereas when you look at the ZS EV, I think both of them are great looking cars, but it's just sort of the differences between them don't quite make sense. And I think personally, what I would have probably have done in that situation is, even as long as the range on that ZS EV is good enough for my needs, I probably would have put a deposit down straight after rather than the 5. I think the argument starts to become a little bit weak when you talk about range. Obviously, if you need that additional range, if 125 miles or 120 miles isn't enough, but 160 is, then clear enough, the 5 is going to be your only choice here. And as I've said, it's a great car. You're not going to miss anything out from it. I would have probably have gone for the ZS EV, and that is my honest personal opinion. So, unfortunately, I wouldn't say that I'm disappointed, because I'm definitely not. This car is absolutely fine. This car will sell decent numbers, but I feel as though the ZS EV is going to sell much more, primarily because of overall it's just a better, well-rounded car. And also, not to mention, for some reason there is still a huge demand for compact SUVs, which is why MG made the pretty good decision of releasing their first EV as a compact SUV. So anyway, if you liked the video or you found it informative, please like the video. It really does help. Dislike it if you didn't. Please make sure that if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe below, because I think we're now on 488 subscribers, and that's really, truly amazing. I didn't think that I'd get that sort of response. I thought there'll be around 2 people who would honestly want to listen to what I have to say. If you do have a bit more feedback, please leave it in the comment section below too. Thank you for watching, and talk to you later.